Well, one government which definitely doesn't share William Hague's vision is the regime running the former British protectorate of Bahrain, the wealthy little island in the Gulf. The UN Human Rights Organization said today that up to 100 people have been reported missing since the government there began cracking down on protests. Before those protests even began, the BBC's Bill Law was investigating the regime's attempts to crack down on the opposition. Here's his assessment of the current standoff.
After 4 weeks of protests at Pearl Roundabout, on March 16th, Bahraini police and army cleared the square. 5 protesters are dead, an estimated 100 are missing. Some arrested, some in hiding, fearing for their lives. There's a climate of fear across the Shia community. Since March 16th and the clearing of the protesters from Pearl Roundabout, the government has cracked down hard on protesters. I've been receiving text messages from people. I've had emails describing houses raided in the middle of the night, ransacked, loved ones being taken away. And Twitter is full of accounts of protesters under the cosh. Bahrain is a country that has presented itself as being one of the most democratic states in the region. The capital, Manama, was on track to be the financial center of the Middle East. It hosts Formula One races and is a base for the US Fifth Fleet. But there's an underside to this story, a sectarian side, as this is a majority Shia country ruled by a Sunni royal family, the Al Khalifas. For years and until last summer, Shia villages had seen regular demonstrations, young men claiming they are treated as second-class citizens. They were demanding an end to discrimination in housing and jobs, and more democratic rights for the majority Shia population. Most importantly, for now, they can't get jobs in the police or armed forces, and the government brings in Sunnis from Pakistan, Jordan and Yemen to fill those jobs. A harsh clampdown starting in August of last year meant demonstrations were a thing of the past.
They've used many type of torture methods. One of them it is al-faylaqa, which is they just put our legs in here and like this, and they put a stick through my legs and with a handcuff, and they left me in between two things.
Jaffa al-Hasabi was one of 400 Shia arrested last summer. He's a British taxi driver, but born in Bahrain.
This is for 23 days. I couldn't even sleep, and I was crying. I want to sleep a bit, just for 1 hour, let's say, but they don't let me.
You confessed, didn't you, as did the other? Was that confession under duress? Was it under torture?
Yes, it was under torture.
He was picked up in August along with 22 others, all Shia, and charged with financing and supporting a terror organization. Are you a terrorist?
Well, it was a joke. It was a joke from the government just to shut anyone who's raising people's demands.
I was in Bahrain in December, following up on the wave of arrests that caught Mr. al-Hasabi. We had our equipment impounded at the airport and were constantly followed by up to 4 cars. Driving around at night, even then the security presence was evident. Armed police were guarding every Shia village. Like Catholics and Protestants, Islam is split into 2 broad factions. Ruling Sunni Muslim regimes in the Gulf were increasingly distrustful of their Shia communities. So when protesters came out on February the 14th, it should have come as no surprise to the government. The only surprise was the numbers were huge, and the protesters kept coming. In the early morning of the 17th of February, having just promised protesters they could stay for 3 days, the government cleared the roundabout. It justified its action by saying the protesters were driving the country to a sectarian abyss. Hundreds were injured and 4 were killed. With hands above their heads, shouting "peaceful, peaceful," the protesters tried to reclaim the roundabout. Shamed into action, the government allowed the protesters back and freed hundreds of political prisoners, including Jaffa al-Hasabi.
think that's happened because of the killing. I mean, the martyrs who've been sacrificed themselves to with the revolution. That's why put a very large scale of pressure to the government and to the king himself to release us.
But concessions to the protesters did not sit well with Bahrain's powerful neighbor, Saudi Arabia. The two countries are joined by a causeway, and just over a week ago, Saudi troops rolled into Bahrain. The Saudis have their own history of discrimination toward their Shia minority. The inability of the ruling Al-Khalifas to put down popular protest was causing great anxiety in the royal family in Saudi Arabia and elsewhere in the region. Bahrain is a tiny island nation in the Gulf. It's one of a cluster of small Sunni-ruled states sitting off the east coast of Sunni Saudi Arabia. Across the Gulf are two huge, populous, Shia-dominated countries, Iraq and a possibly nuclear-armed Iran. The King of Jordan raised the specter of a Shia crescent stretching across the Middle East from Lebanon's Hezbollah on the Mediterranean to Shia-majority Bahrain and the eastern province of Saudi Arabia. But have the Al-Khalifas overplayed the sectarian card? And if so, why are they doing it?
It's a great survival tactic. If you can make the Sunnis that could be in favor of the protest movement feel that they are going to be attacked because they are Sunni or be undermined because they're Sunni, they will back the government to try to keep their status in society. As far as the region is concerned, if you try to raise the sectarian dimension of the whole thing, you get the GCC troops coming in to try to protect the status quo.
And is that a dangerous card to play, the sectarian card?
I think it's extremely dangerous. I think you're creating a monster, you're feeding a monster that you cannot control.
Pulling down the monument at Pearl Roundabout seemed an odd way to respond to a crisis. Perhaps the Al-Khalifas thought that by removing the symbol of the protest, they could remove the protest itself. As events in the Middle East have shown elsewhere, it's not that easy to stop the rising tide of either democracy or sectarian strife.